FlutterFlow recently had their developer conference in NYC, and apart from presenting me the Educator of the Year award,
we want to recognize these amazing educators from our community. James NoCode.
They also previewed FlutterFlow 4.0, which has just been released. There are lots of goodies to unpack, so let's begin. And make sure you stick around until the end, because I'm saving the very best for last. Now, before we get started, as always, all the resources and all the apps that I demonstrate in my videos are going to be available from my Patreon page. And you can learn more about our incredible, amazing community using the link in the description of this video. First, a huge shout out to FlutterFlow. They had an amazing conference, and thanks very much for awarding me the Educator of the Year award. That is greatly, greatly appreciated. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the new goodies that we're going to be enjoying as part of FlutterFlow's 4.0 release. Now, FlutterFlow had 6 major features as part of their 4.0 release. These were visual branching, automated testing, FlutterFlow Marketplace, cloud functions, screenshot generation, and the release of FlutterFlow for iPad. Now, the first feature that I want to talk about is visual branching. And for you to understand visual branching, you have to understand what branching is. And in order for you to understand what branching is, you have to think about how people develop software. Now, I have here an app that I built a couple of days ago, and this is a fairly complex app. There's lots of pages, lots of screens. Each screen has lots of flows. There's app state, page state. There's lots of things happening here, and that's typically what you would expect in a fairly complex app. Now, let's say I've been developing this app all day, and I'm fairly happy with how things are turning out. I'm able to implement the features that I want. I'm able to fix the bugs, and I'm really able to realize the vision that I initially had with this app. And so I'm at a point where, the app is not yet ready to be launched, but I am happy for today. Now, let's say I want to add new functionality into this app, or let's say I want to change existing functionality. Well, the issues that I might have is that because this is a fairly complex app, I might actually add a new feature, and that feature might break existing functionality, or I may change an existing feature, I may refactor it, or I may, change the way it works, change some of the functionality of this feature, make it a little bit more robust, make it faster, etc., etc. But because every feature depends on many other features, there's a lot of, interdependencies with this app, and that's typically how it's going to be in any complex app. I'm afraid that if I change this feature right now, if I sit down and alter this feature, I may actually break the entire app. And, this app that I've been working on the whole day, this app might be broken. And as a result, I may spend the next couple of hours fixing the bugs that this new feature introduced instead of actually, furthering the development of this app. And so branching attempts to fix this exact issue. And it does this by introducing a way for you as a developer to continually develop new features without having an impact on the rest of the app that you've tested, that you built out, that you're happy with. And so as an example, let's say I have this complex app here. I have lots of pages, lots of functionality. And let's say I want to go into my detail page and I want to change something about this screen right here. I want to go to my chats page and I want to change, something about this specific screen here. Well, instead of doing it right here in this app, I can create a new branch. And while working in this new branch, I can change this functionality. I can change how things work. I can maybe improve on a feature. I can change something. And I'm not really worried that, if that new feature that I'm working on right now in this new branch breaks existing app functionality, because I can always easily undo any of the changes that I decided to work on as part of that new branch. And so when you decide to branch off and to either, create a new feature or modify an existing feature, what's going to happen is you're going to have two options after you're done. If you've coded that new feature, you've added that new page, a new functionality, etc., and you're happy with the result, let's say it works exactly as expected, well, in that case, you can merge that new branch into the main app. And this main app is essentially another branch called the main branch. And so before you were developing on the main branch, and with this new branch, if you're happy with it, it's not breaking existing functionality, it's a minor fix, everybody's happy, you can essentially merge it into your main branch, thus essentially taking all your code that you were working on and putting it into your main branch, and that separate branch is going to be deleted. Now, if for whatever reason you've made a change, but you're not exactly happy with how things have turned out, maybe you have second thoughts, or maybe you broke some of the existing functionality, and you've decided, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to try this tomorrow. Maybe it's 2 a.m. in the morning. You're tired, just want to go to bed. Well, in that case, you can simply abandon that branch that you were working on with the new feature without having any impact on that main app that you've had before. And this means you can go to bed on time instead of spending the whole night fixing the bugs that were introduced as part of the new feature that you've decided to implement. Now, what I've just described is fairly standard when it comes to software development. Software developers essentially work off this main branch and periodically create these new branches where they're going to be implementing various features. And when they're done implementing these new features, they can test them out against the main branch. And if they're happy with it, they can merge back. If not, they can just abandon the branch and start over. And this is especially useful if you have a lot of people working on a software project. That way you can have various developers take on specific features without affecting the working version of your app that's living in the so-called main branch. And that's exactly what visual branching is. So in this case, you'll be able to do all of that I've described visually right inside of FlutterFlow instead of doing it via the command line, which is how it's typically done by software developers. So an excellent feature, and one that I look forward to leveraging in the future. The next feature that I want to cover is automated testing. And you can find this feature right here, and you are required to have the standard pro and team plans. So while I don't have access to this feature right now, I can explain to you how this works. Now, this feature introduces something called integration testing. And with integration testing, you can essentially mimic how a user would use your app in the real world. So let's say you have an app here, you have various widgets, you have various things happening. And what you can do essentially is that you can mimic user behavior. You can essentially come in and say, well, this user is going to click on this image, or this user is going to enter some text here, or this user is going to do something else. They're going to drag this list view. And so what you have here is you have an action that the user is going to take. Remember, we are building reactive apps. We are building apps that start when a user does something. So when a user does something, you typically have a certain type of response. So let's say I press this, I expect the app to navigate to another screen, right? So let's say this is a container, I click on this image, I'm going to be redirected to another page, or there's going to be a snack bar that's going to be displayed. I'm going to get a notification. I'm going to get a message. The same thing is going to happen if I have text input, right? So if I have text input and I type something in there, I press enter, the app is going to do something back. Now, with FlutterFlow's automated testing, what's going to happen is it's going to generate a piece of code that looks something like this. Of course, it's going to be doing it visually, but it's still important for you to understand what's exactly happening with this piece of code. And it's actually very, very simple. And once you understand what's happening here, it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand everything that you need to know when it comes to automated testing. The first thing that we need to do is we need to create a test. So here's a test widget with a description. So we're saying that my widget has a title and a message. My widget is a widget that's defined elsewhere. So if you think about FlutterFlow, everything is a widget. In Flutter, everything is a widget. So things like a button, text field, image, everything is a widget. And you're going to be designing these tests on a widget basis, okay? And the next thing you need to do is you need to pump a widget. And this is where you're essentially instantiating a widget. And so you're telling your widget that, okay, title is T, message is M. And the next thing you're doing is you're creating a couple of variables, title finder and message finder, okay? And these are our conditions. And what we're saying here is this is a title finder. And the job of the title finder is to find a text with T. And the job of a message finder is to find text with M. And if you remember, we have a widget where title is T and message is M. And last but not least, we have a couple of expect statements. And the job of the expect statements is to make sure that everything matches up. Because if you think about it, here we are describing things. And here we're saying, okay, we've described everything. Now let's make sure things match up, right? And what we're doing here is we have a title finder. This is this right here. And we have a message finder. And this is a quick test here to see if this widget actually exists. That's all it's doing. It's saying finds one widget. And so in a nutshell here, we have a test that simulates the creation of a new widget with title T and message M. And then we have a couple of variables that find these, pieces of strings in there. So we have T and M. And then we have the actual tests that are these expect statements. So we have an expect statements that expects for this title finder to exist, meaning that it needs to find this one widget here. It says here finds one widget where it's going to find text T, which is this widget here, and a message finder where it's going to find a widget with M here. Okay, so this is a very, very simple use case. Essentially, what we've done is we've created our own widget that we've defined elsewhere, and then we are running a bunch of tests to make sure that this widget exists. And so if this widget exists, then this test would pass. If this widget does not exist for any reason, this test would fail. And obviously, this is a very, very simple use case. With this automated testing feature introduced in FlutterFlow 4.0, you'll be able to test just about any scenario and any condition. And this is something used all the time. This is mandatory when it comes to software development, because anytime I make a change, I need to make sure that nothing has been broken from before. And so typically in software development, anytime you introduce a new feature, new functionality, you submit a new feature into your source control system, you need to rerun all those tests to make sure that there's no regressions. A regression is when you break an existing feature that you've built before in the past as a result of this new functionality that you've introduced just now. So you never want to have a situation where you have a bunch of regressions, meaning that you've broken a bunch of things that you've built before as a result of this new feature. Now, as I mentioned already, you'll be able to do all of that visually. So you won't need to come in and write all of these tests by hand, which is going to simplify this process a lot and also get a lot more people on board to testing their apps as part of the regular development cycle. And so this is another awesome feature that I'm definitely looking forward to using in the future with the apps that I'm going to be building. The next major feature that was released is the marketplace. Now, this feature is relatively self-explanatory. You can just head over to marketplace.flutterflow.io and you can browse it. But the idea here is that you'll be able to buy and sell templates, pages, components, custom codes. So essentially all the bits and pieces that go into app. If you're an existing member of our Mastering FlutterFlow training and community, then in the next week or so, you're going to be seeing updating modules reflecting these new FlutterFlow features. Mastering FlutterFlow is my own training and community that helps anyone build amazing apps with FlutterFlow, and Mastering FlutterFlow is constantly being updated with new FlutterFlow features, including these ones. But if you're not yet a member, you can learn more about mastering FlutterFlow via the link in the description. The next feature that I want to talk about is screenshot generation. And this is an awesome feature and a very, very useful feature. So here I am inside one of my apps, and this is actually an Airbnb clone. And there's lots of pages, lots of things going on. And let's say I want to generate screenshots that I can submit for my marketing materials, for the landing page, or as part of my app submission into the Play Store or the App Store, because you need to submit the screenshots so that prospective buyers can see what your app is all about. And so what you need to do is you want to click on Preview App. Next, you want to click on Screenshot Mode. And here you can select what kind of screenshots do you want to generate. So you can do Play Store screenshots, App Store screenshots, and here you can capture selected pages. And in order to select your pages, you can click on All Pages and you can select the pages that you want the screenshots. So let's say I want my screenshots for these pages right here. I can come back out and I can generate screenshots. And so it's generating 24 screenshots, and essentially it's going to take one page and create different versions of that page. So for tablets, for phones, for this app store, for that app store. And as a result, we're going to have 24 screenshots. All right. So let's wait for this to finish. All right. It finished. Now I can click on download screenshots, and I downloaded a zip file. I unzipped it and I'm seeing the following directories. So we have Android, we have iPad 12.9 second gen, iPad 12.9 fourth gen, iPhone 4.7 inches screen, 6.5 inches, and 6.7. So if we open one of these directories here, you can see the screenshots. Okay, so these are the 4 pages that have been generated for the iPhone 6.7 inches display. And let's say I go into iPad. These are the iPad screenshots. Now, this is very, very useful for me personally, and I'm sure you're going to feel the same, because for pretty much every app that I build, I need to have screenshots to show to someone. Maybe I want to show to a coworker, I want to show to a colleague, maybe I need to, display them on the YouTube thumbnail, or maybe I need to use them in my marketing materials. This is a great feature that I definitely look forward to using pretty much all the time. The next feature that was released is the ability to use FlutterFlow with your iPad. Now, I personally do not have an iPad, so I unfortunately cannot show you how this works. But judging from the video, you're essentially going to have access to the same UI, and you'll be able to build your apps using your touch gestures, and you'll be able to use Apple Pencil in order to do text input. And this is awesome because I can definitely see myself building apps on the go, right? So maybe I'm riding the bus, I'm riding the train, I'm flying somewhere. Well, I have my iPad. I can simply start building my app, or I can continue building an app that I started to build on my laptop. So I see this being as an awesome feature as well. I think a lot of people are going to start using it with their iPads as well. And if you've had a chance to test out this feature on your own iPad, let me know below in the comments how it is working out for you. Let me know below if you've had any issues, and also let me know if you're going to be building FlutterFlow apps on the go. I definitely want to hear from you guys because I don't have an iPad yet, so I can't really test this out. Last but not least, we have Cloud Functions. Now, if you watched any of my previous videos, if you've been with this channel for a while now, you know that I'm a big fan of Cloud Functions. I've been using Cloud Functions for many years to do various things, and I've also used Cloud Functions when it comes to building no-code apps. Now, before, you really could not do it within FlutterFlow. You had to do it separately. It was a separate process, and it was kind of painful, and you needed to be relatively technical in order to do it right. Now, you can do all of this inside of FlutterFlow. Now, first, what exactly are Cloud Functions? Well, Cloud Functions are exactly as the name states. These are functions that are executed in the cloud. So typically when you're building your apps, you're going to be executing functions yourself. You're going to be doing the logic yourself. But with cloud functions, you can offload all of that processing, you can offload all of that logic into the cloud. And in this case, we're going to be using Google's cloud, because cloud functions are an offering from Google. And so this way, you're essentially going to be building functions that are going to be offloaded and running on Google's powerful cloud platform. Now, you can create various types of cloud functions that do different things, but let's start with a basic example. So the first thing you want to do is you want to click here, and you're going to be on a screen that looks something like this. Now, this screen should be familiar to those who have used FlutterFlow, because this is a similar screen when it comes to custom code, custom widgets, things like that. Now, from here, what you want to do is you want to click on Add. And once you do that, you can name your new cloud function. So let's say I want to call it Cloud Function. Once you've named it, you want to click here, and you want to view this boilerplate code. Next, you want to copy to editor, and now you have your boilerplate for the cloud function here. The next thing you want to do is you want to actually add the code inside where it says write your code below, and above where it says write your code above. And you're going to be writing JavaScript code. Now, I've actually went ahead and created a sample cloud function that I want to demonstrate to you guys. And all this function is doing is it's returning a list of countries, with each country having a name and some random number. And so I have here a variable called countries that is essentially an array of objects, right? So you have these square brackets that denote an array, and then you have these curly braces with a key value pairs. So you have name US, number 100, that denote an object. Now, what's cool about building cloud functions right inside of FlutterFlow is that it seamlessly integrates with everything else that's happening in your FlutterFlow app. So as an example, I can define parameters, and I can also define the things that my cloud function will return. So in this case, I have here a list of objects, and what I did was I went ahead and created a data type called country type. And this data type has two fields, name and number. And then I went to cloud functions and I defined this data type here as the return type. So I picked data type, I pick country type, and I specify the list, because we are returning a list of various countries here that perfectly map to that data type that I defined in FlutterFlow. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to click on deploy. Now, I already deployed this function, so I can use this function in my app. And the way I'm using this cloud function in my app is that I have this view here, and this view has a list, and this list is going to be displaying country information. So it's going to display the name and that number that's part of that country data type. And here I have a button. Now, if you click on this button is going to execute this cloud function. So now cloud functions can be used inside of your flows as an action, right? So I have this cloud function here, and I have this cloud function here, cloud func2, which is that cloud function that I just showed to you guys. And this works exactly how you would have an API action, how you would have an API call. So you have this cloud function, we have a test, if it succeeded, and when it succeeded, I am updating widget state. I'm saying true, meaning that we've gotten the data. And when we have the data, I can display the data for you guys. And so after we've updated the state, I'm doing a snack bar that says okay. And the other branch that we have here is if cloud function fails, it's going to return not okay. Now let's go ahead and start our app so that I can show you exactly what's happening here. All right, so here's our app. And right now we don't have any data because we haven't executed that cloud function yet. And so if I click on get data, it's going to execute that cloud function and it's going to come back with the data. And as a result, we are seeing the list of those countries that our cloud function came back to us with. Now, it's important to understand that cloud functions are very, very powerful. You can do amazing things with them. And in this case, we just have a very, very simple case of defining a list of countries, mapping them to our FlutterFlow data type, and then returning the list and displaying them in our UI. But you also have access to your input. So we have this data, and so you can define input parameters here, which means that you can send data into your Cloud function, take that data here, use it, do something with that data, and then once you're done, send the response back into your app and then display that data or do anything that you want with it. Now, another thing that you can do with Cloud functions that a lot of people do not realize is that you can send data into your app asynchronously. So let me show you what I mean. Now, here I created another Cloud function that creates an API endpoint called change name. And if you invoke this API endpoint outside of your app, so using any tool or even using a browser, this Cloud function is going to connect to your Firestore database and change some data around. In this case, we're going to connect into the restaurants collection, find this specific document and change the name of the restaurant. So let me show you exactly how this works. So if we go to another screen on my app, on this screen, I am listing restaurants that I have stored in a collection in my Firestore database. So we have restaurant 1 New York, restaurant 2 California, restaurant 3 Florida. And if I were to run this Cloud function using this API endpoint, it's going to find a specific restaurant document and change its name to Joe's Pizza. Now, after deploying this second Cloud function exactly the same way that I deployed the first Cloud function, I need to go into my Google Cloud Console. And if you're using Firebase or Cloud Functions, you will have your own Google Cloud Console with your specific project. So here I am on my Google Cloud Console. I am inside Cloud Functions, and you can easily type Cloud Functions right here to get to this area as well. Once you're here, you're going to see your 2 Cloud Functions. You can ignore these 2. These are from a different project. And so if you click on this last Cloud function here and you go into trigger, you will see that you have a trigger URL. And this right here is your API endpoint. And so if I click on this and I execute it, I'm going to get an error. It says here cannot get. And that is because I define my API endpoint to have change names. And so if I copy this API endpoint, append, paste it into my browser's status bar, and then append change name here and I execute it, that's going to update the document. So if you go back to our app, you see it says Brooklyn Pizza now. And that is because our Cloud function updated our Firestore DB document from the outside. And this is something that you really couldn't easily do before. Now, this is extremely powerful because essentially you can create Cloud functions that do all kinds of things. You can create Cloud functions that manipulate data. You can create Cloud functions that expose a publicly accessible API endpoint that changes your data in some way, shape, or form. Now, here I'm changing a specific document. I can also have this Cloud function take input. So I can also specify the kind of document I want to change or whether I want to do something else. And then I can make that URL accessible. And then with the publicly accessible API endpoint that I've created as part of this custom function, I can trigger it pretty much anywhere. I can trigger it from my browser. I can trigger it from make.com, from N8N. And once triggered, that API endpoint is going to interact with my app and do something that I've told it to do in my Cloud function. So this is very, very powerful and opens up a ton of things that you can do with your apps as a result of being able to build your Cloud functions right inside of FlutterFlow. Now, as you can guess, these are just 2 examples. You can obviously do many, many more things. It's just up to your specific use case. And in some of the upcoming videos, I'm going to be showing you some of the advanced tips and tricks that you can do with this Cloud functions functionality built right into FlutterFlow. So definitely stay tuned for that. Now, if you've gotten value from this video and you're looking to put some of the things that I talked about into your apps, you're looking to implement some of this functionality with the apps that you're building in the future, or maybe the apps that you're building right now, especially cloud functions, because as you can see, I'm super passionate about that specific feature because it opens up a ton of things that you can now do with your FlutterFlow apps. Then you definitely need to join our amazing Patreon community, because when you join our incredible Patreon community, not only will you be able to view and or clone the specific app that I built right here, you also get access to pretty much all the no-code apps that I built on this channel. They're all there. You can view and or clone all of them. Plus, we have tons and tons of other content, such as Q&As, live streams, behind the scenes content, and our Patreon supported masterclass series where I do a deep dive on topics that the community votes on. And in fact, in the near future, I'm going to be doing another big Q&A, talking with our members, seeing what kind of issues they're struggling with, and seeing how I can help them overcome those issues.